What's up everyone, my name is Kelsey, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing part 1 of my June wrap up. So in the month of June I read only books with queer rep, so LGBTQIA+, etc. So every book I list I'm going to tell you what the rep is. And I read a shit ton of books in June, so instead of doing one huge intimidating 30-minute video, I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. So today is part 1, but total for the entire month of June, I read 17 books, 1 middle grade, 8 young adult, 8 adult, 0 1-star books, 1 2-star, 6 3-star, 5 4-star, and 4 5-star. And then for genres, I had 3 fantasy, 4 sci-fi, 4 contemporary, 4 thriller, action, crime, 1 nonfiction, and 1 poetry. I DNF'd 1 book, sadly. It was Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta, and there's another author, but I can't remember. I'm gonna put the cover over here. This book is like a King Arthur retelling, but like set in the future and in space. And I feel like my first mistake was even thinking I would be into this because I don't care about King Arthur at all. Like I barely know anything about the legend. And the book, I feel like the book really didn't ease me into it. And then I was getting annoyed really quickly with the writing style. It was like really, really jumpy and rushed. And I feel like it reads really young, but also some of the subject matter isn't very young. Like there are a lot of innuendos and like random sexual references thrown in that didn't really fit in with what was going on at that point in the story. And then they were really pushing these romances in a way that didn't feel very organic. And there's like this quirky humor that's pretty common in some sci-fi, but I just didn't think it was landing with this book. And then my last problem was with Merlin as a character. Like he's aging in reverse. I don't know if that's a part of the legend, but it's like during the first King Arthur incarnation, Merlin was an old man, and with every new incarnation he gets younger and younger, so now he looks like a teenager, but he is an old man. He's been alive for, hundreds and hundreds of years. So he acts simultaneously like a senile old man and a horny teenager. Just weird. It was just weird. So not my vibe. Okay, on to books I finished. Book 1 was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is a young adult fantasy. It was a reread for me because I love it. I actually started it in May, but I finished it in June, and it still fits with my theme of everything being gay in June because there's a gay and bisexual main character, multiple bisexual main characters actually, but that's not really addressed in here. So this follows a group of teenagers performing a heist. I literally, if you watch booktube, you know what this book is about. I gave it 5 stars again. The best parts of this book are definitely the characters and the character development, but I also feel like the plot is really well paced and the world building. I really enjoy the world building in this book. The only cons I have are that they're teenagers that act like people in their 20s, and there's like some shitty stereotypical rep for Asian cultures. But I still love my reading experience every time I read this so much. I give it 5 stars, and I'll definitely read Crooked Kingdom again. So next is book 2, Every Hearted Doorway by Shauna McGuire. This is, I don't really know if this is young adult or adult. It was shelved in my library's adult section, and while the characters are teenagers, I feel like it reads like an adult book, and the way the themes are expressed feels more like an adult book. So I don't know for sure. But this is a novella that follows our main character, Nancy, who has just come back from a portal fantasy world and is struggling to integrate back into regular society. So her family sends her to this home for wayward children, is what it's called. And it's basically a school for kids that have gone to portal fantasy worlds and are struggling to live in normal society again. I loved the writing in this book. It was really, really pretty and also super atmospheric. It definitely felt like a fairy tale, which these books are definitely fairy tale inspired. And I loved the themes of belonging and identity, and a main character, Nancy, is ace on page, so that's cool. And there's also a trans side character, and I think the side character, he gets his own book, 2 or 3, I think, but I haven't gotten there yet. I ended up giving this 4 stars. My cons for this book are that it took a while to get to the meat of the story, which is weird for a novella, and it was very repetitive too, which is also weird for a novella because you only have so many pages to get all the information you need. So because of the short format, I also felt like the side characters didn't get as much development as I wanted. But I do know they, are all getting their own books, so I guess we'll see. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is a young adult contemporary. It's about Ben, who is a non-binary teenager, and after they come out to their parents, they are forced to leave their home. Their parents kick them out, and they have to contact their sister, who they haven't seen in years, and start at a new school, and basically start over in a new place at the age of 17 or 18. So, pros for this book is, first, our main character, Ben, is the sweetest. Their voice is really, really passive at the beginning of the book, and you really see the growth of their character throughout the whole thing. And I loved seeing their development so much, and it just really got me attached to them as a character. I also love the relationship between them and their sister. It's starting from the ground up because they haven't seen each other in years, but I love the way it was depicted and the conversations that they have with each other. And you can tell that Ben's sister really cares about them. Ben also goes to therapy and discusses medication and taking medication on page. I also loved the discussion and the resolution at the end of the book with Ben and their family and those family dynamics, and the way it lets Ben come to terms with the fact that their family is not going to be everything they want them to be, and that's okay. Everything I've described so far sounds really sad, but the book is also super hopeful. There are definitely tear-jerking parts where I got a little choked up, but overall, the tone of the book is very hopeful, and it's about self and finding yourself and letting yourself be who you are. My only cons for this book is that the dialogue sometimes felt really stilted and oddly formal and not organic at all, and some of the parts, especially with Ben and their therapist and Ben describing their problems with their sister, that felt kind of lectury, and I feel like it could have been more genuine. The author was definitely trying to provide information, but it just came across as info dumpy. This is also Own Voices non-binary rep. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Next is our book 4 is The Last 8 by Laura Pohl. This is a young adult sci-fi book. It follows Clover after aliens have invaded. It follows Clover, who is an aromantic bisexual Latina main character, which I've literally never read that rep before. It follows her after aliens have invaded the planet and basically wiped out almost the entirety of the population. Those events take place in the first few pages of the book, and then we follow Clover as she survives for a while and then eventually meets up with a very small group of survivors living in a military base, and they try to decide how they're going to fight back or not fight back in order to survive. So pros for this book are that I really liked the plot setup, and the pacing of the book itself was really good. It keeps you interested the whole time, and it's not predictable at all. I also really enjoyed the main character. Her character was very well established, and everything about her felt realistic. The decisions she made sense. She felt very grounded in reality. And we also see a lot of Clover's struggle with her mental health and her will and desire to live at all. There is on-page suicidal ideation, which I feel is to be expected in a book with this kind of subject matter. There were also a ton of classic sci-fi references, which I really enjoyed and thought they were really fun. And this group of teenagers that end up together, everyone is queer. My cons for this book are that there was not really much of a character arc. Our main character felt very realistic, but there's not a lot of development for her throughout the course of the book. I also felt like the dynamics between the group characters were lacking. They just weren't very interesting interacting with each other. And then the end of the book took a turn towards super sci-fi, very out there stuff, where everything else felt plausible, and it was super unexpected, and I didn't think it was very successful. So I ended up giving this book 3 stars, but I would definitely read more from Laura Pohl in the future. Book 5 was Birthday by Meredith Russo. This is a young adult contemporary, and it follows our main characters, Morgan and Eric, who have been best friends since they were born after their parents bonded because the night they were born there was some sort of weather emergency where everyone was trapped in the hospital for several days. So they became friends, and Morgan and Eric kind of grew up together. So they have the same birthday. So this book follows Morgan and Eric on their birthday, starting at age 13, and we see them every year until they're 18. Morgan is, at age 13, when we first see her, is struggling with their gender identity, and she's starting to realize that though she was assigned male at birth, she is really a woman. And she's struggling with how to tell people, or if she wants to tell people, or if this is even a real thing she's dealing with. And our main character, Eric, is having some family problems. Like, he grew up in a house or in a family that on the outside seems perfect and ideal, but in actuality is full of conflict and borderline abusive for much of his life. So pros for this book is that it was super heartbreaking. I cried several times. I read this in one sitting. I started it at like 9 o'clock at night, and I stayed up till 2 in the morning to finish it. And it was just, there were so many parts that were so sad. And not only is Morgan struggling with her gender, but her mother recently passed away, and she's struggling with grief. And it's just so well written, and so it's described so intensely and feels so real. I also love the format of this book. Typically, I don't enjoy books that skip huge sections of time, but I feel like Meredith Russo did it very successfully, and she didn't spend too much time trying to like fill in a bunch of events that happened throughout the year on this one day that she's describing, which is usually my biggest gripe, is that if you're going to tell us literally everything that happened throughout the year, just use a normal format. But she did not, and I think it was done really well. And I loved watching Morgan and Eric's friendship and relationship develop, in the romantic relationship especially. And Eric is just like the ideal love interest. He was so perfect, like really serious book boyfriend goals in Eric. Also, from Morgan's perspective, and Eric's too, the description of having to live in a small town and growing up in a small town was really well done, and like the fear that they both have because of the environment they grow up in. I don't have any cons for this book. I'm obsessed with it. I actually got it from the library, and I'm gonna go out and buy my own copy. I loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. But you should know before you read this book that there is a lot of talk about grief, a lot of thoughts about self-harm, suicidal ideation. There's descriptions of Morgan's dysphoria and descriptions of parental abuse as well. So it was not an easy read by any means. My next book, I want to preface by saying that I found this on a Pride Month queer rep recommendations list, and I'm bitter about it. It is Renegades by Marissa Meyer, and unless I missed something huge, the only queer rep in this book is that one of the main characters has 2 dads, and they're not main characters. So I'm confused about why it was on such a list. I listened to this audiobook from my library. So this is set in a kind of near future where people have developed superpowers, and there was a sort of societal collapse when this happened, and we're reached a point where society is rebuilding itself with the help of the Renegades, who are a group of superheroes that put together laws again and pledge to keep the citizens safe or whatever. And then there's the anarchists, who are upset by this change and want the opportunity to be themselves without punishment, basically. So we follow Nova, who is the niece of one of the leaders of the anarchists, who was recently defeated by the Renegades, Ace Anarchy. So Nova's parents died when she was young, and she was taken in by Ace, and she decides to try out to be a renegade so that she can sort of spy. And then our other main character is Adrian, who is the son of the 2 leaders of the Renegades, and I don't even really know what his plot arc is. He's using his powers in a way that no one expects in order to find a girl that attempted to assassinate his dad. I feel like his whole character arc was flimsy. So pros for this book are that there is casual diversity. Adrian has 2 dads. Adrian is black. There's a disabled character in his hero group. The world setup is really interesting. I like this idea of the renegades and the anarchists and rebuilding society, and a lot of the the superpowers that the characters had were really interesting. Not your basic bitch, I can be invisible. Nova's superpowers are that she can touch someone and make them fall asleep, and also she doesn't have to sleep. And then Adrian's powers are that he can make anything he draws come to life. Also, there's a minor side character named Max, who's a little boy, and I thought he was great. Would have liked more Max. My cons for this book are a lot. I thought the plot was really predictable. There's a minor reveal. I can't even say minor. There's the first plot twist towards the end of the book that's supposed to be a big reveal. So I feel like you see it coming a mile away. It can't just be me. And then there's a big twist right at the last couple pages of the book that I also saw coming. So I was not shocked by anything in this book. It was also really, really long, unnecessarily long, and there's a lot of repetition in the book. The main character, Nova, tells us, or it's in her like internal running monologue about how Ace Anarchy wasn't a bad person and how Ace just wants superheroes to be able to be themselves, and how people will never learn to protect themselves if they have superheroes looking out for them all the time. And it was just like, we heard it so many times. Like, I get it, and it was really like shoved down your throat. And if we cut out like all but 2 of those, the book could have been like 20 pages shorter. There's also a ton of like super cliche, super cheesy, like superhero comic book one-liners and comebacks and monologues and just stuff that could have been fun and cute in a better book, but just annoyed me because I was already having a bad time. And then there are a ton of fight scenes in this book. It's supposed to be action-packed, but I thought all of the fight scenes were boring. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I'm very disappointed. Book 7 is Don't Call Us Dead by Danette Smith. This is a book of poetry about being Black and gay and HIV positive. It's super hard hitting, very hard to read at some points, but really beautifully written. There were a couple poems that I really, really loved, and they just like I took my time with them because they were so good, and they made me like stop and think. And those were Summer Somewhere. It's imagining an afterlife for Black people that are killed by white society in America. So not just like Black people that are killed by the police, but also Black people that are killed because of the way they're pushed into negative circumstances by society in general. That's a hard one to read. And then the other one was Dinosaurs in the Hood, which is a little more lighthearted, and it's about Black people being able to see themselves portrayed in media that's not about being Black. That's just about being alive. So those are both great. Highly recommend the book. I gave it 4 stars. Poetry's still not my favorite, but since I only read a few a year, I'm really glad this was one of them. Okay, book 8 is The Book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Ellison. This is in adult sci-fi. I got this from my library. It's a physical book. And it follows our main character, who doesn't have a name, after a virus or some sort of disease rapidly wipes out the majority of the population. And it's written as a diary, so our main character is writing down her journey as she tries to survive and travel and find a place to live at peace, for the rest of her life. So our main character disguises herself as a man for most of her travels so that she can travel safely. The thing about this virus or disease is that it primarily killed women and their children. So there aren't that many women left in the world, and the ones that are left, when they go to give birth, the child dies and they die. And it's horrific, but also it creates this environment where, it's not that different, but where women are commodities and men keep them and use their bodies for trade and shit. And it's really dark and gritty and grim, but also felt very plausible. So our main character disguises herself as a man so that she can try and move safely. So while she travels, she describes practicing acting like a man and trying to develop muscle tone and learning how to walk differently and talk differently and keep her hair short and fake facial hair and talk the way other men talk about women, but also trying to help the women she comes across. So my pros for this book, I already mentioned a couple, and that is the premise is super dark and grim, and the writing is really gritty, and it doesn't shy away from harsh would-be realities. It feels very plausible. It's very emotional because our main character is trying to survive and also disguising herself, and we're hearing or reading everything she's going through step by step. It's very harrowing, and I thought the format of the diary writing was really effective at getting that all across. My cons for this book are, one of them is a little nitpicky, and that's that the writing of our main character in the diary got super annoying sometimes, because obviously she doesn't really expect anyone to be reading this in the future. So she skips words. There's no reason to include adverbs when you're writing for yourself, but it just got kind of annoying to read. And then there were some parts of the story where I feel like I was losing the thread of an overarching plot. I wasn't sure. It felt really meandering at some points, but overall, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and now I have to find more of Meg Ellison's work because it was great. Oh, and this has our main character is queer. I mean, she breaks it down to another person by saying that she is attracted to men and women, but most of her long-term relationships have been with men and casual dating has been with women. She goes into a little more in depth about herself specifically, but I don't remember the details. Anyways, 4 stars. Highly recommend. Okay, that's all I'm covering for part 1 of this wrap up. Part 2 of my June wrap up will be up next week. It's also all gay. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these or what you read in June. If you read any like super good queer rep books, I really want to hear about them. I post book related videos every Wednesday, so if you want to see more, subscribe. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to keep talking, you can find me at on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Kelsey Reads or on Goodreads at Kelsey Lynn Reads. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.